So January has come and gone. I was going to do this video a day or two earlier, but things happened and I didn't quite manage it. But today I'm just going to have a look back at January on Corrie, look at the major storylines over the course of the month and just give my thoughts on everything. So plenty to discuss, so let's dive right into it. The year, of course, really got started with the big Corriedale crossover. This was something that I'd been really looking forward to ever since it was first announced. Sort of proper soap crossover is something I've been wanting to see for a really long time. Of course, I did my video the day before it aired, showing some potential theories about what might happen. I think it's a really bold concept, bringing two shows together on a large scale like that. Really enjoyed the episode. I thought, the storylines and the characters naturally fed together. They didn't make too big a thing of, the fact that some actors had been in both. There was that almost throwaway moment where Steve said that he thought he saw somebody he used to work with when he saw Jay, which is of course a reference to the fact that Chris Bisson originally played Vikram Desai and Corrie, but they didn't make a massive thing of it, which I think was good. I did feel like the stakes were a bit higher on the Emmerdale side, even though overall there was more cast in the episode on the Corrie side, but I feel like the old drama and major twists leaned more on the Emmerdale side. And I did say in that preview video I think it would be a bit of a climax if all the deaths that happened were predictable, and that is what happened. I think a lot of people had worked out that Billy was going to die, considering, we had all seen that they had filmed his funeral. I think a lot of people, on the Emmerdale side also worked out that John was going to die. But there, I think it was quite a good twist that, it was Victoria that killed him. Don't think too many people would have seen that coming. But one thing that I think it did do really well is set up developments for other storylines, and one that's going to be the first one we get into is Todd, Theo and Summer. I'm really pleased that we have seen a focus on Summer's grief, because Harriet first took on the role of Summer in November 2020. That was Harriet Bibby's first appearance in the show. But aside from the infamous surrogacy plot, she hasn't really had a major storyline of her own. So she hasn't really, for me, had a proper chance to really show what she can do. And over the last month since Billy's death, I think she's finally been able to do that and has been getting praise from fans, which again is something we haven't really seen too much of. And I've always believed that she's got it in her, she just needs to be given the chance to show it, and I think she is definitely proving that. I would like to see a bit more of her friends supporting her though. That is one thing I would like to see done slightly differently. We saw Amy and Asher comforting her in hospital, and we have seen brief moments with Asher and Nina, which I've appreciated, but I feel like we need to see more of it. I think it would make sense that, considering she's lost her guardian and probably the most important person in her life, of course her friends would really want to rally round her. Of course, the one kind of frustration is that we'd got to a point where Todd had finally got up the courage to leave Theo. But of course now things have flipped and Theo's been able to worm his way back in and step things up again. Would hope that Theo's downfall comes sooner rather than later. It's one of those storylines that obviously it has to be long running to give an accurate portrayal of that kind of issue, but given how long it's already been going on, I feel like it's one of those where I'd certainly want to see it wrapped up this side of my birthday, which for the record is the 11th of June. So yeah, hopefully we will see Theo's downfall in the near future. I do have my own idea for that. That Summer overhears something that sounds a bit suspicious because now that she's living with Todd and Theo, and let's face it, she is pretty smart. It's not unthinkable that she would see or hear something that makes her think, yeah, that doesn't sound quite right. And maybe she confides in Sarah, who is, of course, Todd's best friend, and has noticed things herself. We are going to see something later on this week where you get the impression Sarah's thinking something doesn't quite add up here. Maybe she could be the one that ultimately realises what's going on and calls Theo out and sort of helps Todd to see what's really been going on. We almost got to that point where Todd was going to leave him, so getting that support from Summer and Sarah, the people closest to him, would help him to do that. And also, from Summer's point of view, she's never really had a sort of maternal figure, that older female role model, and I don't think she's necessarily needed that in the past because she's had the three dads, but now she's only down to one remaining dad who has obviously got her own issues. I feel like at this point it would be good for her to have that, and they do have a common link through Todd. Another story that came about through Corriedale was the arrival of Jodie. I think a lot of people quickly worked out that she was Shona's sister, but a big part of that is due to the extraordinary resemblance between Julia Goulding and Olivia Francis-Brown. So full marks to the casting department for that. I am intrigued by Jodie. I'm a big fan of the Platts. They are my favourite family on the show, so anything that puts them at the forefront is always a good thing for me. But also, December was the 9-year anniversary of when Shona made her first appearance. So we've had Shona there for 9 years now, and aside from the fact that she was one of the survivors of Nathan Curtis's grooming gang, we still don't really know an awful lot about her. It had already been mentioned that she had a sister, so of course now they brought her in. It does look as though they're going down the sort of major villain route with Jodie, but I'm hoping they don't go too far down that road, so she's sort of past the point of redemption. I can certainly believe, from what we know, that there would be some pretty deep-rooted resentment from Jodie towards Shona because, she escaped from the family, promised she'd come back for Jodie, and then didn't. And now Jodie comes along and sees Shona living the life that she never got. So I can well understand them being deep-rooted issues there, but I would like to think that eventually they can work through it and we could see Jodie becoming a long-term character on the show. One frustration, something I actually mentioned on Twitter a couple of days ago, is that it seems like every new character that Kate Brooks has introduced since she's been producer has been a villain. We had the Michaelis family, or Mick and Lou were never intended to be long-term, they were always short-term villains. We've seen Carl, Theo, Becky, and now Jodie, and it's sort of, you have a lot of them at the same time. You still got Carl and Theo. We'll get to Carl in a minute. Hanging around. We've got Megan as well, and no sooner had Becky left than Jodie arrives. And it was like you can't have too much of a good thing, and I think at the moment Corrie does have too many villain stories going on at the same time. So I don't mind that there is issues there, as I've said, but I would hope that it isn't just yet another villain who has a shelf life, because I feel like there's more than enough of those already. We also got the Websters at the forefront. That's been a big hallmark of Kate Brooks' time on the show so far, for better or worse. Let's face it, anything that puts Debbie at the forefront of the show is a good thing. She is an absolute delight. I don't think it was this month, I think it was earlier when they had that scene with Debbie in the shopping trolley. That was absolutely hysterical. And I love the fact that whilst they haven't shied away from the reality of Debbie's condition, they've still, at this point, very much kept her the Debbie we know and love. I'm not enjoying seeing Carl pushed to the forefront so much. We had the episode, I think last week, before, where somebody overheard Theo in the funeral parlour. There were several characters that it would have made sense to overhear Theo, but it turned out to be Carl. They're starting this rivalry between them. What's new? He's already got enough going on, and I'll be honest, I like certain villains much as the next guy. My favourite Hollyoaks character of all time has literally won a Villain of the Year award. But I don't find Carl to be a particularly enjoyable villain to watch. So the fact that he has got so many different storylines going on at the same time is not something I'm enjoying. I do get the motivation why they've done this, because we know there's going to be a flash forward where somebody's going to be murdered, and there's going to be a mystery about who it is, who's done it, and I guess they're setting Carl up as a potential murder victim, so there needs to be a number of different suspects. So I get why they're doing it, but it's still not for me, really. It's also quite frustrating that they're also treading the tired old trope of having the wrong person jailed yet again, as we've seen, we're now seeing with Debbie, like we saw with Roy over the Lauren story, which have stretched credibility a bit. Yes, the Free the Weatherfield one storyline back in the day was iconic, but you don't need to retread the same ground over and over again. A couple of things coming out of this that I think are a good thing is putting Debbie at the forefront. I think Sue Devaney has been incredible during this storyline. I really like her and Ronnie as a couple as well. And I'm not going to name names because I know some people want to avoid spoilers, but seeing who Debbie's carer is going to be when she is inside next week, that is a dynamic that I am 100% here for. That has got so much potential. I cannot wait to see that. Positives and negatives of the Webster side of things for me. I like the principle of them being at the forefront, particularly Debbie. And of course the relationship with Ronnie has brought the Baileys in as well by extension, which I think has done them a lot of good. But yeah, much like with Theo, I kind of want to see Carl get his comeuppance sooner rather than later now. I think it's been going on long enough. Then we have Swala, because of course that moment in Corriedale when Lisa was in the back of the ambulance, could barely breathe, but still managed to arrest Becky. Iconic. Brilliant moment. I'm sure the Swallow fans have absolutely ate that up. And quite rightly. I'm glad to see them back together, but I do have my concerns. Now, one thing that soaps haven't always done well with big storylines is aftermath. You know, they do the big build up and the climactic moments really well, but sometimes they can rush the aftermath and kind of brush things under the carpet. And a couple of weeks ago, I saw a brilliant article in the Metro. I can't remember whether it was Maisie Batman or Callie Kitson that wrote it, but the great article saying that they need to address Lisa's trauma, and I couldn't agree more. There's a lot of things that need to be worked through that would be important narratively and character-wise. You know, there's the fact that, you know, Carla had brought her home with this woman, and that in itself was a big thing for her. And suddenly Lisa moves her ex-wife in and seemed to fail to recognise how uncomfortable Carla was. I mean, quite apart from the fact that, her fiance's ex-wife has moved in to the home they bought together, it was pretty clear, and Becky made no attempt to hide what she was after. Carla even called it out. You know, things like constantly bringing up her and Lisa's shared history. But at no point did Lisa pull Becky up on it and say, look, you're making Carla uncomfortable, this is not on, cut it out. Now, of course, Becky being Becky wouldn't have paid any attention and was carried on, but it would have been that recognition from Lisa's side of Carla's feelings. And then, of course, as the storyline progressed, and it became a form of abuse. I think it is so important that they have Lisa truly recognise the abuse that Becky put her through and work through that. And similarly with Betsy, one of her mums died when she was 13, so she would have probably had this sort of rose-tinted, almost sainted idea of what her mum was like. And since she came back from supposedly being dead, she'd come to realise that the truth was actually the polar opposite. So, again, she's only just 18, so that is going to be a hell of a lot for someone to work for. And I feel like all of this needs to happen, and for all three characters to really process all of this before they can properly move forward. And it's important to show that. I'm just concerned from what I've heard that they're going to kind of rush into that and have Swallow get married pretty quickly. Do I want to see Swallow get married? Yes, I do. Of course I do. But not yet. I feel like there's things they need to work through individually and together first, and I think it would be doing them a bit of a disservice, in all honesty, in order to, if they just swept that all under the carpet. The final big thing I wanted to discuss was the Driscolls. Kind of going into last year a bit, first of all, I think bringing a new family in to run the Rovers, but having a returning fan favourite as part of that family was a genius move. You know, Eva was a hugely popular character. If you'd have said to me this time last year, give me your sort of top 5 most wanted returns, Eva would have been right at the top of that list. So I was delighted to see her back, as a lot of people were, and I think having her at the centre of the new family gets people invested in the new family straight away. And although I have gone off Maddie a bit, more recently. I'm still enjoying the Driscolls in general. I like Ollie, I like Ben, love Eva. The grooming storyline has been uncomfortable to watch, but I think you have to give a lot of credit to Beth Nixon because, it must be an incredibly hard role to play, playing somebody who is that evil and does the things that Meghan has done and is continuing to do. And if I had to guess at the moment who the sort of flash forward murder victim would be, my guess would be Meghan. We'll see. I do think Sam was a bit of an odd choice to be the first person to figure it out. It's like his involvement just came out of the blue a bit. I think for me, the most logical person to first suspect something would have been Lauren, because obviously working in the Rovers, she spends a lot of time with the Driscolls, she's around them a lot, and of course, given her own experiences with Joel, she would be able to spot the signs. So, kind of similar to what I was saying with someone confiding in Sarah about Theo, I could definitely see a situation where, Lauren sort of clocks an exchange between Will and Meghan that sort of triggers memories for her, and then, confides in Eva about what she's seen, opening up about her own experiences and how similar it feels. I think that's the direction I would have gone if it was more logical rather than, a seemingly random character that's been plucked out of nowhere. So overall, another big thing in general is that it's been the first month with this new soap power hour schedule where we've had Emmerdale at 8, Corrie at 8:30 every weekday, most of the time. Although I'm not on tonight. I think overall it works in terms of story pacing. So with the hour episodes, it can be a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes, if the main storylines are ones that I particularly enjoy, I'm particularly invested in, then it's great because I'm getting the content that I enjoy seeing, not I want to see. But if you get episodes where either the main storylines are ones I'm not as invested in, or even something that I saw quite a few times towards the end of last year, you get episodes where a lot of things happen, but none of the storylines really move on much. It can make them drag a bit if it's on for a full hour. And I'm sure a lot of this is the same for every soap fan, because every fan will have characters and storylines they particularly enjoy watching, and particularly, everything I have said in this video is simply my opinion. I'm sure other people will have different takes on each storyline, and by all means share those in the comments. But yeah, I feel like the hour can drag a bit. And now that we're back to half an hour, I feel like you don't necessarily have the same issues. And let's not forget, for most of the show's history, half-hour episodes have been the norm. It was only in the last few years that hour has become the normal. And even then, for production, it was 2 separate episodes broadcast as one, which always seemed a bit strange to me, but that's in the past now. I have seen a few comments that in some episodes it feels like too much is crammed in now. So you kind of get the pacing issue the other way. And yeah, I do kind of agree with that, actually. There has certainly been episodes where it feels like they're trying to do too much in a short space of time. But I think that is simply an adjustment period. Any kind of new schedule, anything like that, there's bound to be an element of, working things out. So I think within, give it sort of March, April, I think you will probably see that settled down. And also, there's been a good spread of storylines and cast. I was looking at the character count on Corriedale, and of the 22 episodes that we had in January, 18 characters have already appeared in at least 10 episodes. The most was shown over 20, which is extraordinary. Out of 22 episodes, shown within all but 2. Julia Goulding certainly earning both her money and the rest. So I think that's been a good thing, that we've seen a lot of different characters getting the spotlight. Overall, I think it's been a really positive start to the year. I think, there's storylines that have kind of carried over from last year, some that have come out of Corriedale, that are moving forward and are being set up nicely. So I'm at a point now where, I'm looking forward to Corrie regularly, even when it's not necessarily storylines that I'm as invested in. I'm thinking, yeah, it was a pretty good episode. There hasn't really been any episodes so far this year, famous last words, that I thought, oh god, that was terrible. Why did I put myself through that? So I think, yeah, definite possibilities, but hoping to see various villains get their comeuppance and some of those storylines wrapped up soon. But yeah, I've been waffling on for just over 26 minutes now, so I'm going to wrap this one up. If you have enjoyed this video, thank you so much for watching. If you could hit that like button, it would be massively appreciated. And again, I'd love to get your thoughts on any of the storylines that I have discussed in this video, and what would you like to see moving forward for February and into the rest of the year? Let me know in that comment section. Until next time, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you later.